Hey, this is Michael Kramer.
This is Sarah Nofke.
Hey guys, this is Ernie Howard.
Hey, this is Scott Moon, and you're listening to 30
Minute Author Interviews with Preston Lay.
Woohoo!
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. There is a giveaway with this week's episode, but before I tell you about it, let me tell you about our two sponsors. First up is the Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. The Galactic Satori Chronicles. A thirst for revenge sends one man on a deadly journey through the galaxy in this adrenaline-pumping new series. Asher is a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. Projecting their consciousness into unsuspecting men and women, these aliens are learning exactly how to use humanity's own selfishness and greed as weapons against them. Asher bands together with a group of friends, and these four MIT co-eds are more than meets the eye and go to battle with those who are intent on destroying our planet. Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam. Aliens, politics, and murder. Only the first one is new. When an Earth-based terrorist group targets Hanaria's ambassador, two teenagers become entrapped in the conflict. Alex Vernon is the son of an Earth Independence Party representative and doesn't want to follow his father's path of political manipulation and corruption. Rika Miller is the adopted daughter of an engineer and nurse who later discovers she's not human but Hanarian. Alex must decide between his family loyalties and saving the life of an alien he's been taught to fear and hate, while Rika searches for the truth of what happened to her birth parents. The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks and Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam can both be found on Amazon. Or just head on over to Leigendarium.com, check out the show notes for this episode, and in the show notes we will include a link where you can check out both of these books on Amazon and learn more about them and buy them if you would like to. And now for the giveaway that I was telling you about. This week our guest is author Frost K, and she has given one person the chance to win a signed copy of Rebel's Blade. What do you need to do in order to get registered? It's simple. Head on over to Leigendarium.com, find the show notes for this episode, and let us know in the show notes what was your favorite part of the episode. It's as simple as that. Now enjoy our interview with Frost K. Welcome everybody to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. This week we are joined by author Frost K. Thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on 30-Minute Author Interviews.
Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I had to have you refresh my memory on how I discovered you, and it was because of Derek Bourne sharing a post. I put up a post asking, what's everybody reading? And he shared your Rebel's Blade, and I bought it from there. So that is how I got introduced to you. But we like to start each episode here with a segment called Two Truths and a Lie, where you tell me two truths and a lie about yourself. And I try to guess which one is the lie. So I started a win streak last week, and I'm going to see if I can make it 2 in a row.
Okay.
If you can you tell us two truths and a lie about yourself?
All right. So I love fish. I was placed second in a jump rope competition, and the name on my birth certificate is actually Frost.
Yeah, so...
Insert evil laugh here.
That's right. Oh, man. Well, I'm going to say number 3 is true, so it's going to be winning a jump rope competition's a lie, or you said you love fish?
I love fish.
Okay. I feel like you're trying to throw me with the fish thing here, so I'm going to say for no reason at all that you loving fish is the lie, I'm going to say that maybe you don't love fish.
And your winning streak continues. Yes. I hate fish so badly. It's so disgusting. Like, the smell of it, the texture, like, just, so gross. Hate fish.
I am not a fish fan either. I used to eat it. And the only thing I can think of is I just got tired of eating it. I used to eat it all the time when we visited one of my grandparents. I know my wife gets on to me and she's like, you need to eat more fish. And I'm like, I'm good with my steak. So. Oh,
yes. Give me a steak. Like, people get crazy over any type of seafood, and I'll eat a little, like, shrimp every once in a while. Like, just give me a steak and a potato, please. Do not put fish on my plate.
That's right. Oh, that is funny. So you did win a jump rope competition.
I did.
How old were you when you won that?
Oh, goodness. Let me think. It's been, it was 5th grade? I think it's 5th grade.
Okay.
I competed in a jump rope competition, and it was for the endurances, how many jumps you could get in like 15 minutes. So we did that a couple years in a row. Yeah. It's been a long time since there.
Right. I don't remember having to do that at my school, but I do remember jumping rope, and we had to do the physical fitness test every year, which I hated because I was a scrawny little wimp in school, so I always hated those days. Not my favorites.
So. Oh, man. Yeah, what was that, like presidential fitness or whatever?
Oh, I can't remember. It was...
Feels like a long time ago.
Yeah. I always remember I hated doing pull-ups because I was lucky if I could get one in. And then the other one I hated was you have to sit down and see how far if you can touch your toes. And
the stretching one.
The stretching, and they measure how flexible you are. Mm-hmm. They're like, stretch, come on. I'm like, look, this is it. And they're like, you can go further. I'm like, no, I really can't. This hurts. So I think I'm good.
Yeah, pull-ups were like, pull-ups and I were not friends. That, however, I was in gymnastics for years, and so that was like, this is an exercise.
Yeah.
And I'm short, so that that helped a little bit.
That did help. Well, for my listeners that don't know who you are, can you give them your little bio on who you are and what you do? Oh,
man. Who am I? That sounds like a really tough question. I am a bookaholic. I have read like crazy since I was little. Like, the first thing, as soon as summer hit, my mom would take us straight to the library. Oh, nice. And we would pile up on books, and we went every single week. Because, of course, bookworms, like, if you got a couple books in a week, you're going to be through them, right? So every week, that's what we did. So I've always been a crazy bookworm. I've always written since I was little. As I got older, my writing grew with me, but it was definitely not something that was realistic at the time of doing. So I went a different way, and eventually the voices in my mind, yes, I may be a little bit crazy, but they clamored and clamored until I started writing again. And yeah, so I'm basically bookworm turned writer, and I'm obsessed with all things book. I'm a mom, and I like to ride motorcycles. I mean, that's pretty much me.
Do you remember what books you were drawn to when you were young?
Oh, man. I actually just discovered something the other day. So one of my favorite series was the Del Toro Quest series by Emily Rada. And it was this crazy fantasy series about finding these gems that kept the Shadow Lord away. Anyways, I was like, I would read them over and over and over again. And as I got older, because she writes like middle grade books, even as like a teenager, she was coming out with more. So I'd read them like crazy. So that was like, her stuff was amazing. And I was talking to somebody about how I loved these books. And she told me that there was an anime made out of them. So literally for the last 3 weeks when I eat lunch, I sit and watch Delta War Quest. And I just finished this week 54 episodes in 3 weeks, much to my shame. But they're only 24 minutes long, so I just have to put that in there.
Okay, yeah, that's not too bad then. Not too bad. I cheated when I was in, when I was in school in the summer. They had like the library had was it Book It, and it teamed up with Pizza Hut. And if you read so many books, then you got a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut. So I would sit in the library and I would read like Garfield comic books, and then I'd go up to the library. Oh, I just finished a book, and stamp it, and then I'd go get like a Calvin and Hobbes and like flip through Calvin and Hobbes, and I finished another book.
Oh, that's brilliant! That's brilliant.
I got pizza every year.
Awesome.
Do you remember what author it was that, or was there an author that inspired you to actually sit down and start writing?
Let me think. It would probably have to be Tamara Pierce. She writes, one of her first books I wrote is basically about a peasant girl who pretends to be her brother to be able to go into knight training. So I think the first one's Paige. And I loved the way she wrote, and I would read stuff on her website, and my parents would pull it up for me, and I just loved everything that she did. And it made the characters I had in my mind, it made me want to write more, just because her worlds were so fantastic that I wanted to write my worlds down too.
So your world, so the listeners know, and you can correct me because I'm probably going to say it wrong, is the Aermian? Is that right?
Aermian.
The Aermian Feuds.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners the little non-spoiler book blurb on what your series is about?
Oh, let's just choose the hardest thing ever. So let's see if I can boil this down. Basically, there are 5 kingdoms, right, on this island. One of the kingdoms is no longer. They were eradicated by this evil kingdom. They're the Scythia. There's this big wall built to keep them out from everybody because they believe in perfection, in the perfect person, in being flawless. And so there's a big wall built between this bad kingdom and the rest of the kingdoms. Well, time passes on, and in one of the other kingdoms, in Aermia, the king's wife dies. And in their custom there is that to unite the crown or the royals with the common people, that the crown has to marry a common person for love, because it makes the crown stronger, right? So his wife dies, and he is broken, so broken that he can't rule, and his sons are still young, so they're not necessarily the best people to rule. So the country starts to fall apart, and it's basically about Sage, who's a swordsmith, and how she decides she's sick and tired of seeing her kingdom deteriorate and decides to do something about it. And then it's from the other point of view of the crown prince, of him not necessarily being ready to take over the position of his father, but trying anyhow, and kind of the prejudice between the two of them. So yeah.
So you said in there that the royals have to marry a common person to keep the crown strong. Where did you come up with your idea for that? That's kind of an interesting idea.
Well, I love anything that's old. Like if I read anything, like any facts, any history, I love it. Mm-hmm. But most of the time when you hear different revolts, it was because these royals were horrible to the common people. And so there's always this rift between common people and people who are of noble blood, like always. So I figured if you're going to make a strong kingdom, there had to be a bridge. And if I kind of write in that old kind of medieval time period a little bit. And so I figured what a better way than through marriage, if you had common people represented and royal people represented, what a better way to unite a kingdom.
I've read where your series is kind of considered a hybrid between high fantasy and epic fantasy.
Yes.
What is the difference between high fantasy and epic fantasy, and then how did you combine them?
Okay, so epic fantasy, think more like Lord of the Rings. That is considered epic fantasy, right?
Okay.
Long journeys, very detailed, like secondary characters, detailed worlds, that sort of thing. High fantasy can also be epic fantasy, but high fantasy includes like ladies and lords and chivalry and dragons and that sort of thing. That's what high fantasy is considered.
Oh, okay. How did you go about building your fantasy world that you've written your stories in?
Well, I kind of had a general idea of the different countries and the different ethnicities of each country, and I kind of wanted to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right words without giving things away. I like secrets. So it took a lot of thought. It took a whole bunch of research because I know tons of people love magic in books, but for me, sometimes, not all books, but sometimes I feel like magic is just like a label that's like slapped on anything nobody understands. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have, a race of shifters or maybe like a siren race, but I wanted it to be something that you could understand, like it made sense. Like if they're underwater, why were their hair this certain color, or their skin this color, or how their actual gills, like if they were underneath the water, could they come up? Or if it was a shifter race, like how would their wings work, and how would that actually work with like the human body? How would it be possible? So not sci-fi, but I wanted it to be something that made sense. So there's definitely research that went into each individual kingdom, how the ecosystems worked, and I love my research.
One of the things that I really love that you did is you created a map for the world, and of course a lot of fantasies have maps. I printed out your map and laminated it and used it as a bookmark as I'm reading. Did you create your map, or did you pay somebody to do it?
I did. I created my map, and it was like so hard because I have many skills when it comes to designing things online, but Photoshop and I are not best friends, and to use that, Photoshop and I had to become real close, and I spent all day, every day for 4 days trying to create that map, and finally it turned out somebody who was actually capable probably could have done it in a couple hours, but it took me 4 days to create it.
Did you create your map before you started writing the story, or did you already have the story started?
I created my map. I knew what it looked like in my mind. I didn't draw it out. I kind of did like a loose sketch of the outside before I started writing, but that was it. It was probably like 3 weeks before Rebel's Blade actually released when I designed it, because I love maps. I get really frustrated if I read a fantasy book and there's no map in it, because I'm like, that's what makes it fantasy. You have to be able to see where people are traveling to. Sometimes it's hard to imagine. So I was like, I have to get a map in my book. So yeah, it was 3 weeks before it released. I was frantically trying to create what was in my mind and put it on paper and in graphics.
Were you inspired by any countries in particular when you were creating your map at all?
Yes. I should say the different kingdoms, so Scythia is like jungle. So I did a lot of research into South America and like the Amazon forest. So it's kind of similar to that. Aermian was kind of plains part of it and by the ocean. So I did quite a bit of research on that and ships and trading and stuff. And then I was actually born in St. George, Utah. So if you've ever been to that area, like the rocks, the dirt, the sand, everything is red and it's desert. And so Nagali is in a red sand desert, which I knew that very well. Write what you know, right?
That's right.
And then Methi, that kingdom it's in the mountains, which I now live in the mountains. So that was pretty easy to write about that.
Very cool. How many books do you see making up your series?
As of right now, the plan, I think there's going to be 6. There'll be 6 for this series, and then that's not with I have a novella releasing in September. That doesn't count. I kind of like, now that I've written, I love secondary characters. In any book I read, like I always am drawn to the secondary characters, not the main characters, which I know it's weird. So when I write, I love secondary characters. So I'm writing all these new characters in, and I'm like, hey, I really like them. Now I want to write about them. So we'll see. But for Sage and Tell's story, and other people's stories, I plan on 6.
Okay. You do a great job with your characters. From what I have read so far, reading the beginning of Rebel's Blade, which is book 1, I kind of didn't like the king. I kind of wanted to tell him to like suck it up and move on. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of feel the pain that he's going through, but at the same time, you start getting a little frustrated with him. And then his son, who was getting frustrated with him, you kind of see where his frustrations are coming from. And then you met Sage, and I enjoyed reading Sage because lately, I think it was within the last year, I discovered Forged in Fire on the History Channel. Mm-hmm. And so I've been watching that, and so I liked reading her point of view and watch when you first meet her, she is admiring the sword that she just got done making that was commissioned. It was fun. You do a great job with your characters. So with that being said, what character do you enjoy writing the most? Since you say you like secondary characters, but Sage is kind of the main character in Rebel's Blade. What character do you enjoy writing the most? And book 2, Crown Shield, just came out. So have we met them before, Crown Shield? Did we meet your favorite character to write in book 1?
You did. You did meet my favorite character. Actually, I feel like this is kind of a trick question because they're all my favorite characters.
That's right.
But one of my favorites to write has to be Samuel, who's Tell's brother, who's a prince, but he's also the spy master. And I love his character, love writing about him. I love his humor. It's probably part of my husband. Sam is very crass, or can be, and he has this sense of humor that is actually very similar to my husband's. And I just love writing it because his character makes me laugh constantly. It's a challenge because he wears so many different masks as spy master. You're not really quite sure who he is or what's real. And so I kind of, as I said before, I like secrets. So he's kind of one of those characters that you don't really know where he's going, who he is, but you get glimmers here and there, and I like intrigue.
When I was reading, when I met Samuel in your books, for some reason, I don't know why, I pictured almost, because he seems to be the, how do I want to word it, the popular, like if he was in high school, he'd be in the popular crowd, kind of. So I pictured almost, if you had this as a movie or TV series, I almost pictured like a Channing Tatum playing him.
I love Channing Tatum, so, hey.
Is that the way you see him, or do you picture maybe someone else playing him if it was ever turned into a movie?
Ooh, that's really hard. That's really hard. I've never thought about that
Oh,
of
okay.
anyone playing him, because he's just, I don't know. Now I'm going to have to like get on Google and search blonde, blue-eyed actors and like furiously like look through pictures, because I have no answer to that.
That's funny. Who is your so Sage is the main female character in your book? Was she inspired by anybody that you read or anybody that you know in your life?
Sage is she is a compilation of qualities of women that I know that I love, different things. She doesn't necessarily remind me of anybody. My other characters like Mira, or even Jasmine, you meet her very, very briefly at the beginning. Like Jasmine's like how I write her, she's my sister. It's like almost ridiculous. I didn't write her to be my sister, but even like her hair color and eye color is exactly what my sister looks like. So that's subliminal messages for you there, brain doing crazy things. But yeah, Sage, she's probably, I know she's kind of like I know some people don't like when a character doesn't seem super flawed. They have a lot of good things going for them. And Sage does have some flaws, but I really did take the best things that I love from the women closest to me and kind of created her because I wanted a good role model for younger girls, or for women in general, someone to make us all proud, somebody I want to be.
Okay.
I want to be that awesome.
So you said earlier that you do a lot of research and you like doing research. So how much research or how many hours of research go into each book? Because I mean, it sounds like you do research for the countries, for the characters, and for your fantasy land. So how much research has gone into this, I guess, series in total so far?
Oof. There was a lot of research before I started writing Rebel's Blade. It actually, from the time I started putting it, I wrote a few chapters for like in high school for a project, and so I kind of picked off there. And then a year from that time is when I published. So in that year, I did a whole lot of research on the different ecosystems and different things like that, and even like what type of ships they would be using in that time period. Because I was kind of thinking, like, I hate to put a number on it, but maybe 1200, like medieval. Would they have plumbing? What kind of swords? For a girl, if she's gonna sword fight, she's not gonna pick up a big old long sword or even like a broadsword. It would just be too heavy. I mean, unless you are like a massive Amazon woman or just like this huge bulky woman, there'd be no way. So it's a lot of research on how, swordsmiths actually created swords, what type of training she would have as a woman, how, the castles were built in that time period, what kind of weapons would they use, what kind of soldiers or groups, plumbing, like just a lot of stuff like that. And then when it comes to my other characters that will be released slowly into the books, how does their race work? Like not how they're designed, I think that's the wrong word, but how would one fly, or how would one breathe under the water? Like just researching fish that can breathe in air and in the water, and seaweed that extends your lifetime, or different foods that change the color of your eyes, different things like that.
No, okay.
So, yeah, it was quite a bit of research. I honestly would have no idea how many hours I surfed the internet endlessly, popping from one thing to another.
Sounds like a good bit. So you said that you originally started this in high school. So was what you wrote in high school, was it an overall story for how you wanted the series to go, or was it actually a chapter that you wrote for school?
When I wrote, it was not an overall story. It was like the first 2 chapters of Rebel's Blade. And it is when I picked it back up, because it had been bugging me for so long, because I had wrote it when I was probably 16 or 17. I mean, it had been bugging me for forever. And finally I was like, okay, I'm just going to start writing. Just going to start doing it. And I'd gone back over it, and like Till was so annoying. And Sage was not a nice person at all. And so they kind of evolved a little bit, because Till was like, man, if you're standing in front of me, I would have slapped the crap out of Till. Like, I did not like him at all. So my writing definitely did evolve from when I was 17 to when I was in my 20s.
So the first 2 chapters we have now are completely different than what you wrote back in school.
Absolutely different. There was the escape from prison, but I mean, that it's completely different. It's completely different.
That's funny. So we've talked a good bit about your story. Do you have a little excerpt from your story that you could read for the listeners so they can kind of hear what the story sounds like?
I sure can. All right, so I'm going to read the prologue of Rebel's Blade for y'all.
Okay.
Here we go. This was it. Escape was impossible and death inevitable. Leering men surrounded her, the stench of their rotting teeth and filthy clothing assaulting her senses. Black spots dotted her vision as she struggled to maintain consciousness. She couldn't let herself slip away, though, or think of what they'd do if she did. Sage had been trained for this sort of thing, had been told that pain was in the mind, and while she could push some of it away, her body was only so strong. It was impossible to remain unaffected. She blinked, clearing the tears and blood from her eyes, only to catch the dark, empty ones of her captor studying her with amusement, seeming to enjoy her every wince or whimper. Biting the inside of cheek, she steeled herself. She would not give him the satisfaction. If by some miracle she made it through this alive, he was on her list. Her body screamed in pain as someone pushed her forward, her toes skimming the floor seeking purchase. Her hands slick with sweat slipped from the chains, shifting the entirety of her weight onto her manacle wrists. The metal bit into her abused flesh, though she had thankfully lost the feeling in them some time ago. Tremors now racked her nearly naked body. How much longer could she hold on? She peered at the ringleader, a sadistic man named Serge. He appeared to be moving his lips, yet all she heard was the high-pitched ringing in her ears. The edges of her vision blurred, and every sound seemed distorted, almost as if she was underwater. She would die here, and her family would never know where to find her. Bitterness and regret then filled her. She should have killed the Crown Prince when she had the chance. This was his doing, she knew it. If she made it out alive, she would bring down Aermian around his ears. Ta-da!
Very nice. I loved the prologue. So just a little tip for those that want to start reading. Don't read late at night. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Not with this series. So, well, before we leave, and before I ask some of the questions that we're kind of known for, there were a couple fan questions from Derek Bourne that I am going to ask you. The first one, one of the questions he wanted to know was, in terms of genre, which genres would you like to write in the future?
Okay, so hardcore sci-fi nerd. Like, I love Star Trek, I love Star Wars, and I know people are either or, but I like them both. Totally, like, I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. It's so bad. So I actually, in October, am releasing the first of a serial in a sci-fi. So I'd love to write sci-fi. The idea of steampunk and intrigues me because I love steampunk books, like that genre. Oh, I love it, but I just don't think I have it in me. I think I'm just a reader in that genre. But sci-fi is definitely in the future. Fantasy, sci-fi, and I think I'll probably have like a fantasy dystopian series just because post-apocalyptic stuff is like, I breathe it. I love that sort of thing. It's terrible. Like, most of my books, you open it up and it's like all the covers are destroyed civilizations with people walking across stuff like that. Typical post-apocalyptic books.
It sounds like you've got a busy 2017. Because
Yes.
Rebel's Blade came out in March, which is book 1. Book 2, Crown Shield, just came out yesterday. Then you're in a urban and epic fantasy collection called Fire and Fantasy that's coming out in September. Mm-hmm. And now you said you got a sci-fi, the first one in a serial, coming out in October. So that's a lot in 1 year.
Oh man, I've been busy. It's been, I should say, in the year prior, like I didn't publish Rebel's Blade for a year, but in that time I didn't take me a year to write Rebel's Blade, so I was writing other things as well. So there's that. I'm a slow writer, and editing. Oh man, edits are like, I feel like people suck my soul out when I have to go through edits. It's terrible.
That's funny. So what can listeners expect? Do you have anything else planned for 2017, or what's 2018 looking like for releases wise, since you've done so much this year?
So the plan is the first in the serial will release in a science fiction anthology in October, the first of the serial. So every month from, I think there's going to be 6 total, so it'll be October, November, December, January, February, March. There'll be a serial that's released every month, is the plan.
Wow.
Let me say that, is the plan, because it's just, little bitty, like, around 10,000 words.
Okay.
Just bitty serials. So that'll do that. Enemy's Queen, which is the 3rd book in the Aermian Feuds, I plan on releasing, I had thought about December, but there's no way. Like I said, edits and me are not friends, and I should say we're close friends because I like to edit long. I feel like edits are important to a book. They either make a book great or they make a book really bad. So I think the 3rd book will be released the end of January. So you can probably expect, I'm hoping to have, and then book 4 at the beginning of summer or the end of summer.
Wow.
Spy's Mask is the plan. I have no clue for the end of 2018. Who knows?
Wow. You are going to be...
I can't think that far ahead.
Yeah. Well, Derek also wanted to know, if you were to combine 2 genres, which 2 would you choose to combine?
I think it would be really funny to... Well, I should say, I think it would be funny if you combined a historical romance like The Bodice Rippers with science fiction. I think that would be hilarious.
There you go.
But I would probably say I would like to see a steampunk book mixed with sci-fi. I think that would be super sweet. I think it'd be very cool.
Yeah. And then his final question was, would she ever consider doing a collaboration, asking for a friend, winky face?
Oh, yeah. Derek and I have talked about this. I am a control freak. I love the idea of writing with another author. I think that's so cool. I would love to do it. I see these other authors like Jane Washington and Jamin Eve, and even Leah Stone and Jamin Eve, and cool stuff. I love that. I think it's fabulous. The mixing of ideas, and I think it makes the book even more rich. But for me, I don't know. I would have to really, really think about it, because I would have a really hard time giving up control, I think, because I'm very much a control freak when it comes to that.
That's funny. We had talked about that on the podcast when I had him on the other week. I gave him the idea because he says he likes to write the superhero and spy kind of books, and then you're kind of the historical or epic fantasy, high fantasy, but more medieval times. And I had told him about a series that I was starting, and they had a paladin in the book, and in the book the paladin lays his hands on a guy and heals him. And so I had asked the author, did religion inspire the paladin any, being able to heal people like that, or, where was the inspiration for that? And he had said that the paladin wasn't really inspired by religion. That there was even, I forget what book he said it was in, but there was a book where Lancelot did that in a story somewhere, and that was kind of one of the paladin's powers. I told him that y'all should combine and do kind of like a superhero, almost like a paladin, someone that has superhero powers, but back in like medieval times would be kind of cool.
Ooh, I could totally write a race like that. Stop getting my mind going. I got too many projects already.
That's right. You've already got enough coming out in the next few months. Well, here at the Leigendarium and 30-minute author interviews, we're kind of known for one question, and that question is, a penguin walks through the door wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
Says it's too bloody hot outside. Somebody get me a whiskey neat. That's why he'd be coming to my house. I'd make him a good whiskey because it's too darn hot outside.
That's funny. And then before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with listeners?
If you want to write a little bit every day. It could just be a sentence. Just do that. I think that's great. Just a little bit. And for life, be kind and show the golden rule, man. Your life will be great.
And where can our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you or the books that you've written?
If you like to stalk me, I am frequently stalking my own favorite authors on Facebook. But if you want to learn about my books and all that good stuff, I've got a killer website. Check it out. And so that's fun. And I've got some cool freebies on there for anybody who's listening to this. So yeah, my website, it's just frostk.net, and go check that out. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Well, we will put links to your website and all the other places they can connect with you over in the show notes at leigendarium.com. Just go to leighgendarium.com and look for the episode with Frost K, and we will have the links in the show notes. Well, thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on 30-minute author interviews. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
It was. That is all the time that we have for this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you tune in next Wednesday and every Wednesday for another great author interview. Don't forget to head on over to Leigendarium.com and find the show notes for this episode. In the show notes, you're going to find the giveaway where Frost K is giving one person the chance to win a signed copy of Rebel's Blade. Also in the show notes, you're going to find the link to our sponsors, the Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks, and Out of the Gray by Patricia Gilliam. And don't miss another episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. You can subscribe to the podcast on Google Play, iTunes, YouTube, and wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It helps us get discovered by new listeners. I would also like to thank a few of our Patreon supporters. I would like to thank Third Scribe, Maggie Stewart Grant, and Nick Breaker. They're supporting 30-Minute Author Interviews through Patreon. They are also receiving the Patreon-only podcast 10 Questions With. Visit patreon.com/Leigendarium and find out how you can support 30-Minute Author Interviews for as little as $1 a month. Until next time, stay legendary.